Gruyères, Switzerland, 1978. In a quiet stone house beneath the castle slope, a local maid named Alina Roethlisberger quit after 3 nights, claiming something in the basement breathed. Everyone thought she was joking, a prank tied to her dismissal from a summer job assisting the artist Hans Rudi Giger. But the reports kept coming. Neighbors heard machine-like hissing from the cellar, and the air smelled of ozone and animal blood. Today, the basement door stands behind glass in the H.R. Geiger Museum, sealed since 1988. A photo still hangs nearby, a blurred skeletal shape in unfinished latex. Decades later, Hollywood would soften this story, turning terror into fiction, grief into design. But inside the museum archives, the letters remain. O'Bannon's handwritten note to Geiger ends with a single line. "It feels too real. Are you sure it came from a dream?" The investigator opens the file. The paper smells faintly of formaldehyde. The earliest mention of Geiger's nightmares appears in correspondence housed at the Kunsthaus Zurich archive, sketches of biomechanical infants forcing their way from pistons. Geiger wrote, "They come whispering at night, the same sound as my father's medical instruments." The paper shows fingerprints in solvent, suggesting he worked in darkness. Witnesses include his longtime partner, Lee Tobler, an actress who later became his muse. Tobler described his studio as a place where the air bends. Visitors recall the smell of turpentine mixed with rot. Canvases leaned against the walls, their surfaces catching what little light filtered through curtains. Neighbors complained of guttural machinery sounds at night, later explained as the whirring compressor Geiger used to airbrush the flesh metal tone he invented. The maintenance logs show it ran for hours beyond his working sessions. It was during this period that Giger began referencing Francis Bacon and H.P. Lovecraft, merging surrealism with organic dread. Psychiatrist Dr. Hans Kunz, who evaluated Giger after recurring sleep paralysis, noted that the artist translates anxiety into anatomy. His clinical file, opened in 1967, documented nightmares of breathing forms beneath skin. The first seeds of the Xenomorph weren't fiction, they were autobiographical pathology. The Zurich Art Collective still preserves the earliest sketches, labeled simply Invasive Forms, R17. In June 1972, Tobler's photojournalist friend, Walter Keller, took a rare Polaroid of Geiger, sleeping beside a half-sculpted latex form. When developed, the right side showed what Keller described as a face pressed against plastic from inside out. The image, now catalogued as Photo ZB423, was never exhibited publicly. Its edges bear moisture damage from improper storage. Local paper Basler Nachrichten printed a brief mention under the headline, "Local artist's work disturbs visitors." The article quotes curator Bruno Egli, who said, "People fainted not from art, from recognition." The gallery heating failed that evening. Attendees reported metallic tastes in their mouths. The piece in question, Lee II, blended female and skeletal motifs, a theme later echoed in Alien's birth imagery. Photographs show viewers placing hands against their throats while standing before it. The guest book contains 3 pages torn out. The edges remain in the binding. When Tobler died by suicide in 1975, Geiger locked the basement tools, writing only, "The door is closed to dreaming." The journal entry appears in shaky script, unlike his usually precise hand. Neighbors reported the absence of machine sounds for months afterward. That room would remain sealed for 13 years, until the letter from Hollywood arrived. The lock shows scratches on both sides. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, recovering from illness after Dune's failed production, wrote to Geiger describing a dream of being trapped in metallic corridors and finding a shape that was both man and predator. Letter dated March 11, 1977, archived at Geiger Estate, Nr. D47. The paper shows water damage. Several words appear smudged as if touched repeatedly. O'Bannon invited Geiger to visualize it for his new film, Star Beast, which later became Alien. According to production notes, most studio staff dismissed Geiger's portfolio as too grotesque to shoot. In meetings, executives shifted his sketches face down. Tape recordings preserve uncomfortable laughter. Only Ridley Scott saw potential, telling executives, "He's not a designer, he's documenting something ancient." Scott's memo to production designer Michael Seymour mentions biological authenticity rather than creativity. Temperature readings in the art department dropped during displays of Geiger's work. From this point, the real and imagined began to blur. Archivists note discrepancies in dating, some designs appearing in Geiger's sketchbooks months before O'Bannon's request. Negatives show development phases with no recorded studio sessions. Back in Switzerland, parcels of air-dried clay and resin arrived for testing. Museum accounts suggest several assistants quit mid-project, citing nausea and nightmares. Medical records show 3 cases of unexplained respiratory distress. The basement ventilation was checked twice. No contaminants were found. Nobody realized it yet, but something had followed the art overseas. The patterns had begun to repeat. Crew testimony, recorded in Cinefex magazine, 1980, recounts how a pressurized egg prop expanded on its own after hours. SFX technician Roger Dickett recalled, "It wasn't plugged in. We thought it was CO2 buildup until it exhaled. The floor showed condensation patterns radiating outward. Studio logs confirmed a temperature drop near stage H, corroborated by production electrician Janet Loomis. Equipment batteries drained overnight. Replacement costs appear in accounting records. The air carried a mineral tang that lingered in fabric." Scott later joked about the studio's ghost, but medical staff treated 2 workers for panic-related asphyxia. The prop was destroyed, yet later that week a similar hissing sound was recorded on magnetic audio stock. The technician noted pressure changes affecting his inner ear. The real, mislabeled vent sequence raw remains unexplained. Audio analysis shows frequencies matching human breathing but at impossible intervals. No one claimed responsibility for the recording. This was the first documented harm associated with the entity that inspired the cinematic creature. Not a haunting, perhaps, but a psychological contagion spreading through imagery. Production photographs show crew members holding protective amulets, dismissed as jokes in official accounts. Shepperton's maintenance records from that period show unusual callouts: Corridor F malfunction and air pressure investigation, stage H. Both cases were closed as equipment failure, but the night security logs show watchmen refusing certain routes. After Alien's release, the Gallery Art 70 hosted a retrospective titled Necronom Lives. Police records show 47 complaints in its first month, mostly visitors collapsing or reporting respiratory distress. Medical reports cite panic attacks triggered by environmental factors. The exhibition hall's climate control failed repeatedly. Interviewed for a 1980 Swiss TV segment, nurse Eliane Moser, on duty that night, said, "They reacted as if suffocating. Same posture we later saw in the film." Her statement was edited from the final broadcast. The camera equipment malfunctioned twice during filming. Critics dismissed it as mass suggestion, yet museum cleaners refused late shifts. Director Ernst Schmutz admitted he began locking certain rooms. Maintenance logs show unexplained humidity levels near specific paintings. The night guard reported hearing something dragging through ventilation ducts. When pressed about rumors of illness, Geiger responded calmly, "They see what I saw once." His television interview shows unusual static interference. 3 minutes of footage were deemed unusable. The station technician filed an equipment damage report. From this period onward, curators began storing his soft resin casts inside sealed acrylic, citing stability issues. The practice continues to this day. Climate control in those display areas runs at lower temperatures than museum standards recommend. Materials testing revealed no toxins or irritants in the artwork. Yet, visitor logs repeatedly mention pressure changes and metallic tastes when approaching certain pieces. The pattern defied explanation, but demanded containment. Archived correspondence between residents and the local council details complaints of low hums at night emerging from Geiger's residence near the castle. One note, signed A. Roethlisberger, reads simply, "It breathes when he paints and stops when the door opens." Her handwriting appears rushed. Ink smears suggest haste. Police investigation concluded, no mechanical source found. Officer reports mention equipment failures. 2 flashlights stopped working, and a tape recorder captured only static. The basement temperature registered 7 degrees below the main floor without explanation. Journal entries by Geiger, published posthumously, Memoir in 2016, reference exhaustion and the persistence of Lee's shadow. He also details building a reinforced storage cabinet for unfinished sculptures, coinciding with the first foundation of what became the H.R. Geiger Museum. Construction workers reported hearing movement inside sealed crates. Neighbors petitioned for soundproofing. He complied, but one passing phrase from his builder stuck in legal paperwork. The walls moved slightly from the inside. The man later refused additional work at the property, citing illness after each visit. Local doctors documented no physical cause. The petition was closed, marked resolved. Yet locals continued avoiding the narrow street after dusk. A local historian recorded that even animals, cats and dogs, would not linger near the basement windows. The area remained unnaturally silent at night, while camera footage showed unusual light anomalies near ground level. The house stood quiet, but never entirely still. 13 years after Tobler's death, the museum doors opened. Swiss tourism reports list over 10,000 visitors in its first month. Several early guests noted malfunctions of handheld cameras in one wing, later dubbed the Viscera Room. Staff replaced batteries daily. Electrical testing showed no circuit issues. Local paper La Gruyere confirmed at least 2 fire alarms with no heat source detected. Museum logbook entry by custodian Michel Cholet, May 1998. Room temperature fell to 10 degrees Celsius, felt pressure in ears, leaving early. His resignation letter followed 2 weeks later, citing health concerns. After 3 similar reports, museum officials ordered staff never to touch certain vitrines without gloves. The policy remains in employee handbooks today. Humidity sensors near these displays consistently show lower readings than elsewhere in the building. What began as surrealism had become cultural folklore, the house itself breathing like the thing it contained. Gift shop employees reported guests purchasing postcards only to destroy them outside. Security footage shows visitors whispering to the art as if in conversation. Insurance underwriters demanded additional clauses for the museum. File number GR782 notes, unexplained environmental fluctuations. The inspector refused to enter certain rooms alone. His medical leave began the following week. Records show treatment for insomnia and auditory hallucinations. The museum board voted to install new ventilation systems, yet complaints persisted. Cold spots, pressure changes, unexplained sounds in empty corridors. The building seemed to resist normalization. Following Alien's success, countless filmmakers borrowed the biomechanical aesthetic. But correspondence in the 20th Century Fox legal archives reveals a strange pattern. At least 4 production artists reported severe sleep disorders mirroring Geiger's descriptions. Their medical leaves overlap with project timelines. 1. Carlos Huante, later designer on Alien Resurrection, wrote privately that he'd dreamed the latex shapes whisper. His sketchbooks show progressive distortion, images becoming more organic over time. Co-workers noted his reluctance to work alone in the studio after hours. Psychologists classify it as projective contagion, emotion transmitted through imagery. Dr. Heinrich Müller's 1994 paper, Transmitted Anxiety in Visual Media, specifically references the Alien franchise without naming it. His research subjects showed elevated heart rates even when viewing partial images. Still, some patterns continue. Malfunctioning equipment, illness, inexplicable anxiety. Investigators note none of these were ever formally linked to toxins or mold. They were sensations. Prop house inventories show unusually high damage rates for Xenomorph-inspired pieces. Storage facilities reported power fluctuations near certain items. By the late 80s, the myth had taken form. Hollywood pretended the monster was fiction. Switzerland kept its glass sealed. But between them, letters continued to flow. Production companies began requiring psychological screening for artists working on certain designs. Their insurance rates reflected an unacknowledged risk. The sensation had become transmissible through art itself. Art historian Dr. Brigitte Roethlisberger, no relation to Alina, published The Biomechanicus Myth, arguing that Geiger unconsciously chronicled post-industrial trauma, not a haunting, but our collective guilt of invention. Her lecture recordings show voice tremors when discussing certain paintings. The university heating malfunctioned during her presentation. She requested access to the sealed basement artifacts. Permission was denied. Museum chemists nonetheless tested ambient air samples after multiple complaints of headaches during installations. Trace elements showed formaldehyde, consistent with old resin formulas, yet symptoms persisted months after removal. The sensors themselves required frequent recalibration near certain displays. The scientific explanation failed to quiet locals. The belief continued. Tourism brochures omitted mention of the atmosphere that so many reported. Yet visitor numbers grew, drawn by whispered reputation rather than marketing. As one conservator later admitted in interview, even calibration instruments misbehaved. What do we measure, art or presence? The question was edited from the final publication. His resignation followed 3 months later. Colleagues noted his growing insomnia. Local authorities maintained official skepticism. Yet the museum's insurance policy included unusual clauses regarding atmospheric conditions and visitor sensory responses. The document uses careful language to avoid specificity. Medical staff remained on call during special exhibitions. Measurement continued. Understanding did not. During filming of the Alien Legacy documentary, crew members visited the museum. Technical assistant Ben Hawkins referenced finding the old sealed door from 1975, its hinges rusted outward, as if pushed. His footage shows discoloration around the frame that maintenance reports couldn't explain. That footage was never aired. Producers later cited lighting issues. The raw tape shows battery failure at the 17-minute mark. Sound equipment captured low-frequency tones absent in the controlled environment. Director interviews reveal how the cinematic Xenomorph softened the brutality of Geiger's original, removing overt sexuality, toning down human suffering. Production notes show repeated revisions moving toward abstraction. Studio meetings documented concerns about psychological impact on audiences. But transcripts between Scott and Giger, Private Archive LA, Public Copy Czech AL42, include a remark from Scott. Hollywood needs distance. Your version breathes too close to us. The audio quality deteriorates during this exchange. Technicians noted interference. The film became a masterpiece, but the real basement stayed closed. Museum director Marcel Weber instituted a policy. No film crew would access certain storage areas. His memo cites preservation concerns, but staff interviews suggest deeper anxiety. Documentary teams continued requesting access. Most were denied. Those granted limited entry reported equipment failures and unexplained atmospheric pressure changes. Camera batteries drained within minutes. Digital storage corrupted without cause. The story remained visible, but its source stayed sealed. Municipal records, Gruyère's police file, number 12A 2002, list tourism complaints. Unexplained dizziness in Sculpture Hall. Camera burned battery within minutes. Child said, the thing smiled. All cases inconclusive. The metal incident forms show unusual corrosion around their staples. Nevertheless, local insurance demanded night patrol. Security guard Etienne Morel testified to hearing clawed footsteps on the roof between Oro 2 near 3 doors on consecutive nights. Audio tape submitted labeled Hall 2 incident. Playback captures steady ventilation noise, but analysts note irregular resonance frequency consistent with organic breathing. Equipment technicians found no mechanical source. Whether hoax or artifact interference, the file remains part of museum insurance protocol. Guard rotations changed to pairs rather than individuals. Staff turnover rates exceeded regional averages by 40%. This was the last time Swiss authorities formally investigated the museum. From then, ownership fell silent. Documentation, not explanation, protected its legacy. Visitor waivers now include Clause 8B. Management accepts no responsibility for sensory phenomena or equipment malfunction. Tourism continued. Regardless, perhaps because of these incidents. Local hotels reported guests specifically requesting rooms with views of the museum. Night photography showed unusual light patterns in windows that should have been dark. Temperature readings near the foundation remained consistently below normal. The phenomenon had become a quiet attraction. Containment replaced denial. The glass barrier around the basement door was reinforced twice. After Giger's death in 2014, memorial viewings filled the museum courtyard. Floral tributes lined the path, yet several attendees described feeling watched from beneath the grating. Security footage shows multiple visitors stepping back simultaneously from certain areas without apparent cause. A British tourist's online post, April 2015, archived by the Municipal Archive, recounts hearing a metal heartbeat beneath her feet while waiting near the basement railing. Staff dismissed the claim, yet cameras show she stepped back precisely as emergency lights flickered. The electrical system showed no malfunction when tested. Conservator Anne-Marie Vogeli later stated anonymously, "Sometimes we hear faint scratching near the sealed wall. No rats. We checked." Maintenance records show 3 separate pest control inspections, all negative. Temperature sensors continue to register cold spots that move between readings. Visitors now whisper requests before photographing the display cases, not superstition, etiquette. Gift shop sales show unusual patterns. Customers purchase replicas but often leave them behind. Lost property contains dozens of abandoned souvenirs. The museum continues operating. Tours avoid certain sections after 4 p.m. Guest books show repeated mentions of pressure changes and breathing sounds. Official responses credit ventilation systems. The collection remains carefully maintained. Display cases receive weekly cleaning. Temperature and humidity stay controlled. But the basement door remains sealed, both preservation and precaution. Isolation has become protection. The glass barriers stay in place. The narrator's journey closes in the same basement corridor where Alina once worked. The glass remains in place, dust outlines where hands have rested for decades. A laminated sign warns simply, "Do not knock." The air feels dense, carrying a faint mineral scent. Museum logbook, visitor entry, Doggreen 143, signed only researcher night session. Temperature drop 5 degrees C at 23:47, no air leak detected. Conclude interview, leaving offering of paper flower used in sound test. The entry shows a coffee stain. The handwriting grows increasingly erratic toward the bottom of the page. Camera log ends abruptly. Maintenance records show battery replacement the following morning. The security footage from that section contains an unexplained 8-minute gap. Standing before the sealed door, the investigator hesitates. The recorder clicks off, out of respect more than fear. The wall-mounted thermometer shows a reading 3 degrees below adjacent areas. Beyond the glass, the darkness hums, faint, mechanical, breathing in rhythm with the visitor's own. The concrete floor shows unusual wear patterns, as if from years of weight shifting against restraints. As museum staff often remind newcomers, it's just the ventilation. Their smiles never reach their eyes. Replacement requests for that section occur monthly. Personnel files show frequent transfers, but the reports keep coming. The logbook gains new entries weekly. The glass barrier shows fresh handprints on both sides. The case of the Xenomorph's true origin is not demonic nor extraterrestrial. It is human. Artistry, grief, and obsession crystallized into form. Geiger's unseen room remains sealed, yet his imagery continues to infect imagination worldwide. Museum attendance grows yearly. Visitor logs show increasing reports of atmospheric phenomena. In its silence lies a question every visitor brings. What happens when art captures something it was never meant to show? The answer remains in documentation rather than explanation. Maintenance reports, temperature logs, employee transfer requests. The building itself has become part of the exhibition. Newly installed sensors monitor air pressure and electrical fields. Staff rotation ensures no single person works extended periods near certain displays. The insurance policy renews with specific exclusions. Today, the Geiger Museum operates as both showcase and container. Patrons photograph themselves beside biomechanical nightmares. Children press against glass barriers, pointing at shadows that seem to shift. Security cameras continue recording unexplained environmental fluctuations. What remains remarkable is not the phenomenon itself, but how thoroughly it has been cataloged, normalized through documentation rather than understanding. Every incident generates paperwork. Every experience becomes archived. The ventilation still hums. The basement door remains sealed. Visitors continue to whisper their theories. And somewhere in the museum storage, boxes of malfunctioning equipment accumulate, silent witnesses to something still breathing behind glass.